Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura McBride, and I am the program manager for the SJA Fellowship. We're thrilled to have you all join us for our very first community-wide Works in Progress call. On the occasion of Steve's 70th birthday, we thought that the best way to celebrate this week would be to bring our community together around some of the ideas and values that fueled Steve's work. Today, you're getting a peek into our fellowship. Every month, we bring the fellows together to workshop ideas, seek feedback, share what they're discovering, and sometimes hear from special guests. We call these sessions Works in Progress. They're rooted in Steve's belief that it's important to remain a student no matter where you are on your creative path. It's a space for curiosity, humility, and vulnerability, where the questions matter more than the answers. Today, we're joined by two extraordinary people who will talk about their own creative paths, their successes and stumbles, what they've learned, and what they are still learning. Before I introduce our guests, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for joining us and being a part of our growing fellowship community. As nominators, mentors, fellows, and even applicants to our upcoming 2025 cohort, you've each contributed to the community we're building. We're glad to have the chance to bring all of you together in the same space. Later in our call, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our guests. You can either drop them in the chat and I can ask them for you, or you can raise your hand and when we open up for questions, you can ask them directly. I'll be back on later in the call to kick off that Q&A. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, you'll see that we're recording today's call, so we'll be able to share this conversation with future members of our community. And second, please remember to remain on mute during the call. If you do want to, you can feel free to use the chat to share ideas and questions while we're together. Now, I'm very excited to introduce our guest. First, I'll bring on our moderator, J Wang. Jay was part of our very first SJA Fellowship cohort. She is a filmmaker based in New York whose work explores cultural intersections with the surreal and the absurd. She holds a BFA from NYU and is currently pursuing her MFA in film at Columbia University. We're so excited to have her guiding today's conversation. Next, I want to introduce the trailblazing filmmaker John Chu, whose work spans blockbuster films and innovative series. His recent projects include a critically acclaimed adaptation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical In the Heights, as well as the worldwide phenomenon Crazy Rich Asians, which is one of the highest grossing romantic comedies of all time. His latest film, Wicked, is up for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. John is also the author of Viewfinder, a memoir that dives into his life's journey from growing up in Silicon Valley to navigating the complexities of Hollywood. The book is an inspiring exploration of identity, creativity, and self-acceptance. John studied film at the University of Southern California, where today he supports filmmakers through the Jon M. Chu Cinematic Arts Scholarship. Welcome, John, and thank you so much for joining us today. And finally, I'm honored to introduce Ed Catmull. Dr. Ed Catmull is the co-founder of Pixar Animation Studios. Steve became the majority shareholder in Pixar after the pioneering computer scientist Alan Kay introduced him to Ed and his co-founder Alvy Ray Smith. Ed is the former president of Walt Disney and Pixar Animation Studios, and he previously served as vice president of the computer division of Lucasfilm. Ed founded 3 of the leading centers of computer graphics research, housed at the New York Institute of Technology, Lucasfilm, and Pixar. These centers have produced some of the most fundamental advances in computer graphics. Ed received his PhD from University of Utah. He is the author of Creativity, Inc., which explores creative leadership and the culture that shaped Pixar. He's won 5 Academy Awards and was awarded the ACM Turing Award in 2019 for his contributions to computer graphics. Welcome, Ed, and thank you so much for your time today. I'm really excited to get the conversation going, and so with that, I'd like to kick it over to Jay.
Hi, Ed. Hi, John. I'm so excited to be moderating this conversation. I mean, you've both contributed to films that I grew up with and have just really opened my eyes to the possibilities of storytelling. So on the topic of influences and on the occasion of Steve's 70th birthday, I was curious to ask this first question to you. How did Steve's work and values influence your creative process and still resonates with you today? And maybe we can start with Ed.
Well, I first got to know Steve just before he acquired Pixar from Lucasfilm, and the reason he bought our group out of Lucasfilm was he was very unusual in that he saw the long-term potential. Because the fact is, things weren't very advanced at that time, and you had to have a long-term potential. So there was that element, and the other one was that while Steve had a very strong personality and very strong opinions, he would change on a dime if he learned he was wrong. And for me, this is one of the most powerful things is you have opinions, you have visions, and you change when you learn something new. And it's actually one of the elements of rather profound development of the Pixar culture was how that we always do that.
Wow. I grew up in Los Altos, so Steve was always our hometown hero. I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, and my parents have a Chinese restaurant in Los Altos, and so the stories of him go way back. And everyone was always rooting for him. This was Silicon Valley before it was really the Silicon Valley, before it was the center of the world, and that vision influenced everything, even culture in Silicon Valley of starting your own company or having a vision for a place. So for me, I'm a huge fanboy, I guess I would say. And I had, Think Different posters on my wall in my dorm room. I had Macworld magazine stacked to the ceiling in growing up. But really, it was when I started making little movies in high school, in junior high and high school, that people who would come into the restaurant and found out that I was editing stuff on VCR to VCR, and VCRs, by the way, are these things that we used to have tapes in videos instead of streaming, I guess. And so they were like, hey, there's these digital video cards. You got to use digital video cards. And so they would bring beta versions of these cards or software from Adobe. And so I, at a very young age, got to, without any manuals, got to sort of just try things and explore it. And I found a medium for a voice that I didn't know I had. And I had to figure a lot of things out. And maybe the first 10 years of doing that, going to USC Film School, it was learning the technology and what it is allowing me to do. It was after that I really appreciated Steve's philosophy of craft, of building things, not about just about the technology, but of using these tools to express yourself. And that has affected every part of my life and my work. And I think of him, if not daily, every other day, of inspiration, because I think what he's done, witnessing it as a young person, to watch a person create something out of nothing, but then also come back and tell the greatest sort of business story ever, not just with Apple, but with Pixar. To me, that changes your life no matter who you are. And I got to witness that firsthand as my hometown hero.
Thank you. I feel like what you guys are talking about of like not being sure of like what's going to happen, being able to see like long term and dealing with things that like have so much innovation and like risk and uncertainty. So I'm curious to explore more about that. Like for both of you, I think like Ed, you had this dream of making the first computer animated film, and Jon, you wanted to bring musicals to the big screen and showcase like dancers and uplift these people. So in terms of for you guys, when you are like navigating a project or, this big dream, how do you like navigate that risk and uncertainty, especially when it hasn't been really done before and you don't know the clear way?
I'll let Ed start that one.
Okay, well, I had such a great experience in graduate school that it influenced me and that I wanted to have that kind of environment for the rest of my life. So then I went to New York in Long Island for 5 years to form a group and build that kind of culture. And in the process of doing that, some of the decisions were very good. It's the reason that George ended up hiring me, because we had such an incredible group. But the decision was to engage completely with the community, and we published everything we ever did. And Steve, who's notoriously secretive, never questioned my decision to publish everything we did. But also at New York Tech, I did some big screw ups. My theories about how to do things were a crock. And when I left New York Tech, I realized half the stuff was right and half was wrong. And I keep all the stuff that was good, but for the new things I was going to try, I would probably have that same ratio of half right and half wrong, and that it would probably continue for the rest of my life. And it's not that I have a way of measuring that, but I thought it was important to understand that I was wrong more than I thought I was. And that became this sort of thing for me throughout my entire life, is I'm still learning and trying things, and I'm just wrong a lot.
I love that. In fact, I think what you guys, the culture you built at Pixar, again, as a young person watching that, I will never forget watching that trailer for Toy Story in the movie theater at the Shoreline Century 16, I think it was at the time. And it was like, I'm sure it was what people felt like when they saw Snow White, whatever they had at that time, whether it was a trailer or whatever, for the first time. My jaw was on the floor. I understood, even at that age, because I loved animation, that we were witnessing something that was going to change everything from then on. And of course, because I followed Steve and of course Ed, but like this, again, I think it's like this culture of knowing that when you break something, everyone's coming after you. And there's going to be a lot of doubters. And so when you are a fanboy of Apple in the 80s and 90s, you are used to people saying, Apple, what are you talking about? Computer animated movie, what are you talking? And again, I'm not in the mud the way Ed was, but as just an observer, it was to read the articles that say, oh, what are they doing? Why are they bringing him back? And then to see that did not affect him. To see then bit by bit, and me telling people, there's a reason they call it an iPod and not an iMusic. Like there's a bigger thing happening. He put a hard drive in a deck of cards, and that is insane. And he was such a great storyteller, saying, 1,000 songs in your pocket. To me, I got to, and I would sneak out of school to go watch every Macworld keynote. And so and what I realized is he's a great storyteller, and he wasn't just telling the story of the thing he was making, or the thing he was selling, but he was actually also telling the story of his life, that this comeback was a part of a bigger story that he knew. So I didn't know him, so I'm just assuming all these things. But for me, that was the inspiration of everything that happens when people are naysaying what you're doing. That you have to just keep walking, and you focus on the craft and making your thing. And to me, having someone to look up to say that, and living in a culture of Silicon Valley where everyone was the underdog, but everyone saw the future, and then watching the rest of the world catch up to that future, again, it changes your brain forever, because every time you feel the resistance, you're doing the right thing. There's a song in Wicked called What Is This Feeling? And the main lyric of that is loathing, because these two women are meeting each other and they hate each other and they're roommates and all this stuff. And everyone's like, why don't they just name the song Loathing? And a lot of us would just call it Loathing. And what we realized in understanding, because I think the story is a lot about change and being uncomfortable in change, was that actually it's not loathing. That actually this feeling that they're feeling is you resist the thing that's going to change, or the person that's going to change the rest of your life. We always resist that. So for me, I realized that in order to get through the hard stuff, and I have to do this every movie. When you start with every movie, it's a blank slate again. And if you mess up, you may never work again. So I have to constantly figure out ways to get myself to keep walking. And for me, it's this idea that when you that every time you start something, you're gonna feel that. And so I love that. I think it's built into being raised in the Silicon Valley and having that startup mentality, even though we're doing art. And being able to, every time we feel that the fans are coming after us, or why are you casting this person, or that even the crew itself will doubt you. When you make a decision on set, everyone's whispering like, I don't know about that decision. I don't know. But I keep thinking about what you guys had to go through at Pixar, what you had to go through at Apple. That is part of the job. And if you can't survive that, then what are you doing here?
You actually want to be in that place.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you're copying what's there. That's not creative.
Totally.
You're not uncomfortable.
Totally. I can't even imagine what you guys went through in that Braintrust and thinking the follow-up to Toy Story. Or when Toy Story 2, I hear this story, I don't know if this, I assume it's true in some ways, when you guys took over Toy Story 2 and had to start from zero again. Like, how do you even mentally all come together and say, we're going to make the best, if we're making a sequel, we're going to make the best sequel. And by the way, I think it's one of the best movies of all time, Toy Story 2. I can't even understand how you guys have that conversation as a group.
Well, there is, there's a basic idea. So one is you really buy into the fact that everything needs to be good and needs to be different. So you pull out everything. For me, Toy Story 2 is the defining movie of the company because it was so brutal, but the fact that we did it and held up the value said, okay, we always have to have that, which means we always have to do things that are really hard. So Ratatouille is an example of, it's not obvious that you should do that. Or Up, an old man that floats away because he's depressed.
Yeah.
And or Coco, because right now Mexican culture in the U.S. unfortunately isn't taken well. It's like, which is well, that's not a great marketing idea, but it was a great film, and it's taking on things that are really hard. We actually completed 21 of the 22 films we started while I was at Pixar, because we always finish. We'll adjust, we'll do it, but you've got to get it done. And if it's hard, then it's hard because it's so different.
I love that.
Yeah. I want to jump in here and kind of talk about like this tolerance for discomfort and tough things that you guys both have. Like Ed, I remember in your book you mentioned like if a project is going really smooth, like you're like, what's wrong? Because like where is it in the process? Where is like the panicking and like the things going wrong? And so I would love to kind of like go through this process with you and maybe just start from, I'll bring in Lauren's question, which is how do you both deal with blank slates when there's like nothing there? Do you get the white page panic too?
For me, and I'm only saying this, I'm only speaking up now because I've recently realized, not recently realized, but really been aware of how many times I have to go blank slate. And not just at the beginning of a project, but if you're actually collaborating, which is difficult, and we'll get into how the actual pitfalls of collaboration, which nobody ever really talks about. It's way more difficult on everything than it is easy. But I realized like when I start a movie that I don't write. I like to write, but I like to work with better writers than me who are smarter than me. I know I can adjust and figure out things together, but I love a new perspective that come in. So I have a vision for what this movie needs to be. The writer has their own opinions. And then we have to, as long as we have the same sort of general destination, the path to get there can be many different ways. And so I have to get along with this person. We don't have to agree on everything, but we have to be okay with arguing or disagreeing about certain things. We also have to be okay with like letting it sit and have the time tell us, and maybe other parts of the movie will tell us the way to go. I think it's a lot of planning, but at some point when we start shooting, and you have actors who have their own opinions, and you have production designers who are designing things, and you're trying to tell them like, hey, I want to create this vision of what a metropolis and metropolitan area in Oz would be like, and I want culture to be in the Munchkin land, so it's not just about size, but it's about what they harvest, which is joy and happiness and the flowers and the colors and honey. And then they start building things, and you're like, oh my, does that fit? So then I have to reset myself. And that's very vulnerable to say, I'm going to trust you. I hopefully hired the right person who we agree on the same destination. And then you have to go through that again. And then when you're shooting and they're saying lines in ways that you didn't think the jokes were written like that, but what they're doing is interesting. And so when the movie starts to speak back to you, you have to be present. I mean, there's some directors who don't do that, and they have a very specific vision and they go for it and they are amazing at that. That's just not me. That's not where I feel like I'm best at. When the movie starts to speak back to you, like, oh, this character is much more quiet than I expected, but I'm really curious. I lean into that curiosity with the camera and with our whole crew, and we start to move into that direction. And it doesn't mean we can always change it. You don't have to be right all the time. We can always shift. And then you shoot the movie and you have a bunch of footage. You're like, that footage looks good. It's going to be great. And then the editor takes a pass. And I like to edit. I love to edit, but I purposely don't edit the first cut at all. And I let our editor take over to show me what a pass of this movie would look like. I don't show him storyboards. I don't show him anything. And then he shows me. And then it's one of the worst days of the whole film because you feel gutted. You're like, oh my God, I did all this work and this is not the movie I thought. But that is the beginning of the making of your movie, of the final draft. And then I have to do this constantly. Then visual effects come in and they're different than and I just think that for me, it is telling my story to myself, to my brain, that this is going to, if I can think of it in my bedroom, it's not good enough. If I can put it in a storyboard, it's not good enough. It's when everybody adds a little piece and we do something that none of us could do singularly, that's when it's a movie. That's when that's when, to me, the human spirit of collaboration really starts to bubble up. And that's what I really try to keep my radar on at all times. But it is not easy. There are constantly conversations with my wife being like, I think I just made the worst movie. Oh my God, the design is terrible, right? And then and you just try to figure out where you give and where you accept. And I will tell you from experience, you do that over and over and over again. You realize you just trust your instincts and you trust that you chose the right crew and you're gonna come up with something that is unique and different.
Yeah, that's really interesting because just like the process of trusting people and also like within collaborations, you talk about the pitfalls of collaboration and there being conflict, which is like very necessary to creating something new. So Ed, I'm curious to hear like your perspective on this in terms of collaborating with people and like what are like values that you like to foster within a team?
Well, the key thing across the company, and I've talked about the Braintrust, but it actually applies to several groups. The Braintrust is effective because they're very intense. They do argue, but they're arguing about the movie and about the solution to it. It doesn't become personal. It doesn't become I'm right. It's like this works or this doesn't work, and they'll argue about that. They'll walk out as like deep friends and they enjoy the conversation and the disagreement. You know, and I mean, as another example is, which is something that almost nobody knows about, and this was that when Pixar was a public company, which it was for 10 years, we had a board of directors. And this was a really lively group with very powerful, opinionated people in there. But over the course of this time, Steve fired 2 members of the board of directors. And the reason was, he said, that they never disagreed with him. And if they don't disagree, they're not bringing anything to the company. And it's this, there's something about a group agreeing on trying to solve a hard problem, but not agreeing on how to do it. So they're just pushing and giving their ideas, and then you're open to others because you know you're not being judged for having an opinion, you're being valued for having an opinion. And the other thing on the first part of the question you asked about the blank slate is that Pixar, we have never made a script that came from the outside. We bring outside writers always, because the things that John was talking about, they bring something and a skill and understanding of structure and dialogue, which are very valuable to filmmaking. But in terms of the directors, we pick people who we think are going to be good directors and have strong personal ideas about things, but they don't actually know what they want to make. So we give them a year to go off and develop 3 ideas. And the reason we pick 3 is that you do run into these walls all the time, and you can bang your head against the wall. So the notion is, okay, switch to another idea, because it frees you up. And at the end of the year, and we give them some support, art support and story support to do that. But at the end of the year, they pitch the 3 ideas. And they nominally, and they've all watched the process, so they know how it works. Nominally, it's the creative group around them is going to select the idea they think is best. After the presentations, they leave the room. The discussion is not about which idea is the best. The discussion is, which idea do they really want to make in a movie, and they're going to commit the next few years of their life to make. And it's that passion that drives it. And very frequently, the final movie isn't very similar to the idea that's pitched. It's the passion that we want.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love how you guys kind of really trust in people, trust in your collaborators. And yeah, like Ed, you talk about in your book how like a good person is better than good ideas because ideas come from people. And I love like you both work in such collaborative spaces. So I'm curious, how are you able to kind of inspire each person to like do their own work and do what they're there to do and trust in them while also kind of working towards this like vision that you have for the project?
Part of it is, I mean, really, because I'm not the great storyteller. I think I wish I were when I was a kid, but I realized actually that's not what I'm good at. But I feel like what I can do is to pay attention to the dynamics, how people interact with each other. Is it safe? Are they challenging each other? And if they do that, the motivation and the spirit of it comes from them. I don't need to say, this is where we're going and let's all follow behind. So, no, that's kind of who they are. They want to do that. They just need it to be a kind of environment where they trust each other. Then it's safe to disagree and it's safe to make mistakes. That we don't even use the terminology of failure in the company. You try this and it doesn't work. Let's try something else. And over again, keep trying something different until finally it starts to come together.
I also think it's like for yourself and anyone out there who's like a writer or a director, like I think it's also like it took me a long time to figure out like what is the role of the creative leader in a group. And there's many different definitions of that. And there's many ways you can do it. Like you think of Wes Anderson and he has everything planned and he storyboarded everything and everyone's there to make that plan come to life. And those things are seamed up and amazing. Chris Nolan has such a great aesthetic and it's a Chris Nolan movie. But I don't think that is the only way to go. And I think that we put on pedestals geniuses, people who we think were gifted by God to have some vision and that we're supposed to serve that vision. Like that person's a creative king. And I think what I love about Ed's book, but also the culture that Silicon Valley's brought to people too, is like, we're human. I don't believe in genius. I believe that it can make genius work when everything matches up. And maybe there's a person that has an idea that is genius and then everyone needs to get onto that board. But for me, I felt very self-conscious about liking to collaborate because people judge that as weakness or lack of vision. but I know exactly what I'm going to make. When I read a script, it takes me 4 hours to read the script because I'm looking at every frame and I know exactly what it is. I could draw it out in stick figures, but I could draw it out for everybody. But I know like that's the starting place for me. I know that my ideas will develop the more I get to know these characters in the world. My vision will change, and I don't want to be stuck on some, you know, light that the heavens gave me at some point. And so at the same time, people do need leadership. And so for me, it's like when I get a group together, like Ed said, like having someone who will speak their mind is great, but I will also speak my mind. You can tell people I don't love that, and you can tell it in a kind way. You don't have to be cruel about those things. And but I think that honesty actually opens people up to their honesty as well. So for me to say, and it's really hard on some of the first meetings, but some of those are the first most important ones when you have, you know, artists bring you images of what you wanted to, you know, what you wanted Emerald City to look like. And they're showing you to say, I don't know why, and you don't have to have all the answers. I don't know why I don't feel like this is it, but it doesn't feel like it. But this thing, the color of this gets me there. And it's just these little breadcrumbs that are leading you on something. As long as you have I think the bigger, it's your reason of this movie or a reason of this thing you're making. That's the most important thing. Why it needs to be made now and why you are the one to make it what you want to say in that. Once you have that, then how it all comes together will be the process, will be the adventure that you've signed up to go on. So I just love, I think that oftentimes we question ourselves because people will try to take advantage of kindness. People will try to take advantage of collaboration and will try to run over you. And you just have to get rid of those people. Those people aren't for you. Or I've had instances where, yes, it's okay to check somebody a little bit and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm open, but I'm not going to get run over. I still have a vision. And I think we don't talk about that enough so that everyone feels like they have to choose a side. Are you a genius or are you just following everyone else? I just don't think that's true. I think it is inches. I think it's day by day, every step. You're making moves. And someday you're going to get shit on. And those are hard days, even for me, even on set of Wicked. You feel like you just get stepped on. But if your focus is to finish the thing, make the thing, or you could spend all your time, energy about why did I just get shit on? Why did that person treat me like that? Why did that? You're not making the thing. You're over there. You're talking about yourself. Like focus on the thing. And to me, that's the best adventure. It is the most gratifying thing, and especially because you discover something together. And there's nothing better than right now when I just went to our dinner for the nominees for the Academy Awards last night. You're surrounded by all these people you look up to, and I'm looking at my crew and cast because there's a lot of them there because a lot of them got nominated, and now they're all in suits, not in like sweatpants that we usually are in, and we get to whisper to each other like, remember when we came up with that idea? That was crazy. Like we could have thrown out that idea in 2 seconds. And now it's in a costume in a shop at Target. Now it's on a coffee cup in Starbucks. Now they're making a theme park. That is crazy that those decisions were so minute and tiny, but we did it together and now it's iconic. Like that is the best to grab your collaborators and be like, wow, we did. I can't imagine, Ed, for you to look at your group of Braintrust and say what you guys did. Maybe when you walk into California Adventure, you're like, holy shit, this is forever. I can't even imagine that.
Well, I personally, I mean, there are two things that bring to mind there. One is when people present something new, they feel vulnerable. And one has to understand that people feel vulnerable when they're doing something new. The other one is that, when we come back to this notion of, there are some people on the filmmaking side who are like the solo geniuses, but they're very rare. I think a lot of filmmakers aspire to be like that, and it's not the right thing to do. It's much better to aspire to have a team of people around who you're working with and collaborating with. It's far more successful. I think it's got a richer palette for it. And the notion of aspiring to be the solo genius is damaging for a lot of directors. Just like it's damaging to get so much power as a director that you don't have to take any feedback. What? Well, that's not a good idea. It's like, no, actually, I want the feedback, sometimes really tough feedback. Incidentally, the Braintrust was formed because we originally got some good feedback from Disney, but as we started to get better, and they lost the person who was good, who then went off to Broadway, we formed the Braintrust in order to provide the feedback as new directors came on. Now, the thing was, it didn't actually work well because that feedback group was in the same building, so they also lost objectivity. The person who became our feedback person was Steve Jobs. And I asked Steve to never come to a Braintrust meeting. Because one of the rules is the powerful people in the room are supposed to shut the hell up for the first 10 minutes. Because if they say what they think at the beginning, they're setting the tone. We don't want to set the tone. We want to hear the other voices first. And then they enter the discussion. Now, Steve was such a strong personality, it wasn't possible for him to say anything in the meeting at any time without changing the tone. And he knew that. So he didn't come. He saw the movies when he showed them to the board of directors, and later when at Disney with the steering committee. And then that's when he would give his feedback. Now he becomes an external force who has a vested interest in us succeeding. So every night before we'd show it to him at the board meeting, he would call me up and he'd say, Ed, how's it going? And I'd say, well, we've got problems with this one. Okay, nice to know. I wouldn't tell him what it was. I never told Steve how to think. I just said, we have problems. He'd say, okay, I'll see you later today. Or I might say, this is going pretty well. Nice to know, thank you. I'll see you later today. But just that, so he kind of had a tone. And then he would come in and he would, after seeing the movie, talking with the director and the producer afterwards in the board meeting, he would start off by saying, I'm not a film director. You can ignore everything I say. And he meant that. I mean, he really did. But he would carefully dissect it, and he would say things so powerfully, it was like a gut punch. Now, the weird thing is, in all those years, Steve never said anything that had not been said by the Braintrust before. But a lot of times, people would come out saying, it was like a gut punch to them, that they had never heard this before. Because in the process of working with each other, they also learned to ignore each other and not hear it. But you couldn't ignore Steve. So there's this dynamic of vulnerability, external voices, openness. It was really, I mean, for me, it's like this really fascinating dance that's going on all the time. And it's never the same.
Mhm.
I think that those fresh eyes are so important. Like I save the people I respect the most to see it a little bit later in the process, because I want to save they know how to either speak to me in a way, or they can diagnose the symptom that's right. They don't always give solutions. You know, the worst note givers are the ones who give you the solution or what they think is the solution, but they hired you to figure it out. But they will, but also the skill is to hear the feedback and not take necessarily solutions unless they're great, but try to diagnose what the symptoms that they are all saying. Oh, they actually don't like this main character. So it's not about taking the scene out. It's about like, where are we focused on her so that we are rooting for her earlier? Because if we don't like her, if you root for her, then that means you like her. So it's like that, and I think it's important, like you said, don't hire people who are like you. In fact, I love troublemakers. I love rule breakers, and I love shit starters and divas. Like, I'm okay with that because they have great things in them. And and you have to recognize your own weaknesses. Like, I'm a little bit of a rule follower. I'm a little bit soft. So I like people who are going to like prod and like question those things and be a little bit cynical on certain things, because I know that anything I'm going to make will never be that. I just won't. I don't see the world like that. I don't want those things out, but I do think that it's not naive, that that hopefully the stories that we tell can be optimistic, but show that life is messy, but there is light at the end of that tunnel. And so I love when you hire your crew to not be afraid to have people that are actually very different than the way you do things, because you're ultimately going to be whatever job you are, but you're ultimately going to be the one that's sort of finding that line, painting the lines. So it's good to have that energy.
Yeah, like you
I'm
said,
so
life
sorry.
is
I want to jump in
messy, but
here.
it's good to have a messy crew to help
Yeah,
solve messy problems.
exactly.
Convey messiness.
Yep. I loved it when Steve Jobs, and I'll never forget this, and it's such a weird thing, but like he had his keynote and he was like, we made a mistake. We didn't include the CDR in the iMac, and we're behind the ball. We're like 8 months behind the ball, but we're going to change that today. I remember watching that being like, I've never seen Steve Jobs admit he's made a mistake. I've never seen him make a mistake. It feels like everything. And
I have.
before, but him doing that in a very public way, and then watching these iMacs come up with CDR, and guess what? iTunes was the thing that changed. Was the center of the core of what allowed iPod and all these things. To me, that again reminded me, even the great Steve Jobs can change things publicly, be not even humiliated, but could be seen as humiliation, and do the right thing. And that was really inspiring for me.
He deeply understood that there's no advantage in being wrong.
Yeah.
And he could admit it easily. And I have heard also people criticize him for having made a mistake. And I'm thinking, what are you thinking? It's acknowledging it and fixing it quickly was his power. And a lot of people think they need to be right in order to be a leader. Wrong. You need to be able to change to be a leader.
And he had to be wrong for a long time before he was right.
I really wish we had more time. Jon, Ed, this has been such a valuable conversation. I just want to thank the audience for all of your questions, and thank Jon, Ed, and Jay again for your time and for the thoughts that you shared with us today. We are so excited for the next time we can come all together as a community. If you want to reach out with any questions or comments, you all have my contact information, and so I look forward to hearing from you. And until then, just another note of gratitude for everyone's time today. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you, Lauren, and very nice to talk with you, Jon.
Honor.
Thank you, Jay.